Hello everybody. My name is Brian Andrews. Currently the executive director for Lakes Area Restorative Justice Project. Haven't always been in that role, that's for sure. So I'm going to give you a little glimpse of my addiction, from the starting points to the depth of it, and then when I transitioned out and what it took. But also to be able to understand that it wasn't a one and done process, and there is no cookie cutter path to recovery, and I think that's important to know. All right, so a little bit about me. Like I said, I haven't always been in this role. I didn't think it was ever going to be a possibility. I lost all that hope in my addiction. I lost direction. I lost purpose, and most importantly, I lost the ability to dream. And I believe that I was going to die in my addiction. Looking back at my childhood, my dad died at age 39 from addiction, and so I just anticipated that I wouldn't live past that either. Once I was in the mix of it, in the thick of it, I thought, you know what? There's no way out. I don't have hope or direction, and I pushed everyone away. And so dying at age 39 or before was something that I even came to a place of being okay with. So I want to share a little bit about what did that journey look like for me. It wasn't just I wasn't coaxed into it. But looking back in my childhood, I use the word groomed a lot because I believe that there was unintentional grooming of me becoming where I was in my addiction. You see, growing up, facing a lot of different childhood difficulties, from traumatic experiences to with like poverty and being harmed by people at a young age, and then the impact of an uninvolved father. I remember being surrounded, social norms, which we'll talk about for a minute here. What does society say is normal? Growing up, and even today, if we look around, we'll see alcohol signs on the walls. We'll see billboards. We'll have our favorite hunting magazine. There will be something about alcohol in there as well. And so it's everywhere we look, there it was. And everyone in my life during those younger years, everyone was drinking. My dad and my grandfather owned a bar. And my mom, anytime there was family reunions or get-togethers, there was alcohol. And so at age 8 was when I took my first drink of alcohol. Excuse me. And I remember watching. And see, on the inside, I struggled knowing who I was. I struggled trying to find that. Does everybody feel like this? Because what I'm seeing in the adults in my life, they look like they're having a good time. And maybe that's the answer. And so at 8 years old, during a family reunion, I remember taking my first drinks of alcohol, not getting told why I shouldn't do it, but being told that it's theirs, so don't touch their drinks, and that stuck with me through today. And as I continued on, any time that I spent with my dad was spent in a bar. When I did good in school, I was rewarded by bringing my report card to the bar. And I look back, and my mom's a fantastic person. I love her to death, but probably not the best place to celebrate doing good, right? And so looking back at it, at the same time, I wanted that relationship with my dad, so I would be willing to go to any lengths to have it. And so as that spiraled, and I continued to try to discover who I was, my dad died when I was 14 years old. I made a pledge to never use drugs when I learned that he died from addiction. And so my friends and I, we made that pledge. But by age 15, at my first encounter, I ended up using drugs with my friends. We broke that pledge while out ice fishing. And I remember, we have a set of beliefs and a set of values that we're born with. It's just part of who we are. And I remember that day when I did that, I thought we could just do it once and then it would be over with. I could go back into my regular life. But once we stepped across that line, I stepped on my value system and my belief system, and everything that I was raised knowing. And so within a short period of time, I ended up getting marijuana for other people, and then got introduced. See, the doors opened into a new world, and in that new world, I met new people, and the new people introduced me to new things. And some of those new things was my first encounter with cocaine. You see, when I was trying to be kind and help someone out by giving them money or borrowing them money, the favor was returned by calling me into a bathroom where he ended up dumping this white powder out on a mirror. And I remember that experience was one that was scary, but also left me wondering what was so good in my dad's life that he couldn't be there for me. And so when I did that, what I later discovered was cocaine, and waited for something magical to happen, and it didn't. That should have been a good enough sign for me not to do anymore, right? It just didn't work for me, but I didn't. Instead, I gave him another $25, and the second time I got high. Within a couple week period, I got introduced to new people, new experiences, and a big part of that driving force for me was, number one, all the older people at the bar kept me connected to my dad in the afterlife. It was like I was, I don't know, hanging around the cool guys. And I remember that first time after I used the cocaine, ended up going out to the bar and hanging out with some of those older guys, and they ended up calling me with them. We left in a car, and I felt like I was one of them. You see, my whole life I was searching for belonging, worth, value, to feel important, and in that moment I felt like I was important, and I felt like I mattered. And so hindsight's a different story, right? And so anyway, we get to this place, and everybody goes inside, and there's a total of 7 people. And one guy's up at the front dumping this rocky, powdery substance onto a plate. And he says, "How many people we got here?" And he counts 7. He says, "7?" And then one of the guys says, "No, just 6." And so the guy turns around and counts. Pivotal point in my life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus me, that's 7. And one of the other guys said, "No, you guys know what happened to Brian's dad. Brian's not going to do any." And I think back at, you know how hard it must have been for him to even say that? Like the difficulty in standing in the gap for someone. And I look back and just heard recently that he's not well. And I'm like, you know, he did what he should have done to try to keep me. But I felt this sense of pressure, peer pressure, that was, if I say no to the majority, what am I going to look like? Am I going to be outcasted from the group? Am I going to be disconnected from this connection that I thought kept me close to my dad? And so he looked at me and he said, "Well, Brian's old enough to make his own decisions. What's it going to be?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course." And I remember from that day, and it's marked in my memory in time, I went up there and did what I later discovered was methamphetamine. And for the next 12 hours, I was extremely high, and it transitioned through, I could do anything. And by the time the sun rose the next morning, I felt like I couldn't do anything. I felt like life was coming on top of me, the pressure of all of it. The realization that what I had done and where I was going was heavy, and I would have done anything to get rid of it. I ended up going that day. I knew where that guy lived, and so I traveled to the apartment building, ultimately knocking on doors until I got to his door, and he opened it up. And I didn't realize it wasn't just his door that opened up that day. It was a door that opened up into a whole new world. Systematically, one week after another, month after month, I met new people, and it went from $25 lasting a couple days to having a $1,600 a day drug habit. I went from looking back at my first encounter with the criminal justice system. As I sat there, I could think of senior class president, homecoming king, plans to go to college, and here I am in jail. You see, I had to really slow it down. I had to really stretch out the timeline to see the details, to look at the different choices that led me to where I was at. It wasn't 1, 2, 3. It was about 10,000 decisions and thoughts and actions that led me into that spot. And so it didn't stop there. I continued. I ended up finding, getting to a point where in 2000 I went to treatment. I thought I finally found my way. I finally discovered my higher power. I discovered a path forward. Went back to college. I was finding my dreams again, and starting the best relationship of my life, and ended up getting injured while at my very first job, and not even realizing that I was going to get backdoored. The doctor prescribed me Vicodin, and went from Vicodin to morphine, and then kept increasing the morphine to a point where I was already addicted. I was living out of my worth and value being defined by what I was doing and how I was performing. So I was maximizing everything I did. I would make it look like the best. If I couldn't do it perfect, I wouldn't do it. but ultimately I got recruited to a great job and getting great pay, only to realize that I started dropping out the most important pieces of my life. I dropped out of college, I stopped going to meetings, and then I stopped going to church. And then before I know it, I pushed this person away, and this person, and this person, so all I knew is my wife and my family, and we were in chaos. Cars getting repoed ultimately led me to a place where I ended up thinking the only solution was to buy and sell drugs, and I'd get my mortgage caught up, rescue my family, and then I would be back, I would quit. What a joke that was, right? Whatever it was, I was living a lie. See, at a point in time in my life, I'd set what's called a reservation. At a point in time, I was asked, how long do you plan on staying sober for? And I had set a date and time by saying, whenever life feels worse than it was when I quit. And when I did that, I created an opportunity in the future for me to use drugs. Not knowing that, but subconsciously marking that time in my life. And so when I'm losing my cars and I'm losing, getting the foreclosure on the home, ending up in the hospital, relapse, I came to a spot where I lost everything. I lost my home, I lost my job, I lost my mind. In and out of the Grace Unit, trying to find help because I kept trying to commit suicide. Ended up with my family in a homeless shelter and me walking back and forth on the highway here in Brainerd thinking, do I jump off the bridge? Do I jump in front of a car? The only way I can be a benefit to my family is if they get a death benefit after I die. It was a dark and lonely place. I was told by doctors, you just need to think happy thoughts. And I'm like, if I could, I would. I'm beyond the happy thoughts. And so ultimately what I did discover is I discovered peer support services. And in that path, I had a guy that continued to try to invest in me and continued to stop by my house. My addiction hadn't run its course, ultimately bringing me to a spot where I had thresholds. And from 2013 to 2014, my life found new lows. You see, as long as the bills were paid, I thought I was doing okay. As long as the kids were in school, I thought I was doing okay. As long as that, I didn't consider being hospitalized for a month and dying of an infection from IV drug use. That wasn't that bad. Or a month later when my wife overdosed and almost died. That couldn't have been that bad. That wasn't a threshold. But the last threshold was, as long as I have custody of my kids, I'm not like the other junkies that are out there. And in 2014, March, that day came. I knock at the door. As I looked out the windows and I seen 2 Brainerd police officers there to answer my prayer. So I didn't see it that way. I was just like, this is going to be a really bad day. Not realizing that it was going to be the beginning of the best times of my life. But also the most painful part of my life. You see, in order to want change or to desire change, the pain of staying where we're at, it's got to be greater than the pain of change. And I had been gifted that in that moment. You see, as it got to a point where I came to the realization that I was going to have to hand my son over to a social worker. But I had power to decide how that was going to look. And there was no good way. It was all painful. And I remember as I was handing him over that day, him crying, kicking and screaming and calling for me. And I knew I was responsible for the pain that he was experiencing that moment. And I remember at the same time that I would have done anything to make the pain go away for him. It didn't matter what I was feeling. I was okay with the pain for myself. And as I got to jail that day, I usually have a 911 prayer. God, please get me out of here. But this day it was different. It was, God, please keep my kids safer than they were when they were with me. You see, my kids weren't living. They were surviving. They weren't thriving. They were surviving. We were all existing in this toxic environment that wasn't good for anybody. And as that memory of that day stays stamped in my brain, and I welcome it, so I never forget it. I remember that if I want to change, I got to move forward from the pain that I'm experiencing right now. And so over the course of the next couple of months, I was faced with a lot of things. I had gotten arrested, so when I got out, I tried to find direction. I was getting peer support services still. And I thought, well, at least we're at the bottom now, so it's not going to get any worse. And then knock, knock, knock. And I just laughed. I'm like, well, we already know it's not going to be worse. And I open the door, and it's the sheriff, and he's delivering eviction papers. And I'm like, oh, yep, it can get worse. And so as we were trying to fight to get our kids back, because we have a 6-month window, I'm like, how is this even going to be possible, right? How is it going to be possible when we're doing it alone? It is going to be impossible if we're trying to do it alone, but if we're going to get help and we're going to welcome support, it's going to become possible. You see, I didn't receive that until May, the willingness or the desire to receive support or to ask for help. And so when I had reached that point on March 20th, 21st, I came to a point where I said, I'm not rolling the dice anymore. I'm done. I'm finished. I'm wrapped up with that life. It has nothing for me. And I'm done rolling the dice for my kids' life, for my life, for our family's future. I'm done. And in that moment, I realized that it was the clearest I've ever been, because I didn't experience a minute or a second of withdrawal, because it was true and complete. And at the time, I'm facing 48 months in prison too. So I'm like, how in the world can I have the desire to fight for my kids, to get the help to rebuild my life, and know that I'm going to go away? And it was difficult. And what I discovered was this, that maybe I wouldn't get them back. And what fueled my walk in the beginning was this, that maybe I'm not going to get my kids back, but what I'm going to do is if I don't, and they ever want to look to see if I tried, they're going to see that I did everything I could, that I did everything that was asked of me, and I did my best to try to get them back. And so with that was my foundation. And so as I started going to treatment, I started giving it everything I had. I had been clean, and then I'd relapsed. And so when I relapsed in that 2009 period, I was hard, because I'd built this life, and I built this everybody's perception of who I was. It wasn't the real perception, but it was a fictitious perception. And so trying to rebuild that life from that spot was hard because of all the labels that I placed on myself. I believed I was a strain on society, a deadbeat dad, a criminal, a drug addict. There's a million labels, and the weight of them is exhausting.